I can already feel spring in the air here in Brisbane, and I am seeing springing in my bullet journal too. My September bullet journal theme is a vintage floral moment with just a sprinkling of fairytale magic. I am so enjoying the metallic gold embellishments in this theme, and I hope you enjoy them too. Grab your journal and journal along with me if you like. Hi, my name's Erin, and apparently I'm really into blue right now. I'm using the Bodhi.grid A5 journal from TFOC, and I've gone ahead and pre-cut these headers with my Cricut on some permanent gold vinyl. I'm not including the process of designing them and cutting them and weeding them in this video, but you can see that in my vlog next week if you like. I've picked out some blue and gold markers that I think will work well with the theme. I didn't end up using the calligraph, but I used the others. I really wanted to bring out the kind of vintage brassy gold colors in this theme, so I picked up some wrapping paper specifically to make this. I got this from my local cheap shop, dollar store, whatever you call those where you are. And the star of this layout is this beautiful PET tape from the Washi tape shop. This one is called Rose Nocturne. As always, there are links to everything I'm using in the video description so you can find them easily for yourself. This gold leafy PET tape is from JOURNALSAY, as is this one with stars and moons. And of course, my trusty band of everyday essentials, my favourite eraser, my favourite pens, my mechanical pencil. And my Cricut tools helped me out with this one a little bit too. Let's get stuck into my cover spread, which is a functionally not so useful but incredibly fun spread to set up. The very first time I laid my eyes on the Rose Nocturne tape from the Washi tape shop, I had this theme instantly in mind, fully realised I just needed to gather some other things to make it happen. Especially this wrapping paper. I really had a specific kind of bronzy gold in mind, and it took me a while to find the right one. I wanted it to be a little shiny, but not so shiny that it was glossy. I almost wanted it to look like I'd just put a sheet of brass in my journal, if that makes sense. And this sheet of wrapping paper was only $1, so I think that's a win. I'm using it to line the top and bottom of my cover spread here with a torn edge, so it has this very organic, very aged, very vintage feel. And because it's going all the way to the edge of the page, I'm making sure that I add quite a bit of glue tape, especially along the solid edge, so that when I'm turning the pages, I'm not accidentally getting my fingers in between the decoration and the actual page. I want them to stick really well together. I went in with my mechanical pencil before I turned the camera on and planned out where I wanted my quote to go on the right page here, but as I'm laying down this paper, I'm realizing that I've actually placed the quote a little bit too high, so I'm going to move it down by 2 boxes as far as dot grid spacing when I actually letter it onto the page. I'm using the Pilot Fudemakase pen in blue black. I was going for kind of a copperplate calligraphy style here, and I actually considered doing this with a dip pen and some ink, but I have found that fountain pen inks don't go very well on the paper in this journal. It's, I guess, not fountain pen friendly, so in order to avoid a bleedy, smudgy mess, I've gone for a marker instead. The quote I'm lettering this time is from J.M. Barrie. It's actually from Peter Pan, and it reads, "All the world is made of faith and trust and pixie dust." And I wanted to point out, you have to go pretty slowly when you do this kind of thing. The footage you're watching right now is at 250% speed, so it's quite sped up. If I showed you this at regular speed for the whole quote, we'd be here for quite a while, but I thought I'd show you just a little bit at normal speed while we do the word dust here, and you can see how very slow it really is. Copperplate calligraphy, or I guess copperplate style calligraphy, given I'm using a brush pen here, is something I'm still fairly new to, and I definitely need more practice, but I'm pretty happy with how this came together. I deliberately started lettering from the bottom of the quote so that I'd still be able to see the pencil markings for the ones I'd planned out above, which was probably not the best idea. I did smudge a couple of the dots on my eyes down the bottom of the page by placing my hand there, but I solved that problem at the top once I worked out that it was a problem by placing a bit of my wrapping paper over it, so I wouldn't smudge anymore. I just really didn't want to erase all of my pencil and have to do that planning again. And now we add the blue florals. My vision for this was really that the flowers would sit over the top of the gold paper. The Washi tape shop do a lot of these floral PET tapes, and they've recently started releasing some that have kiss cut stickers on them so you can just peel them right off the PET tape, which is amazing. This is not one of those, unfortunately. So while the design has some natural breaks in it where you can kind of separate the florals into little clusters, I have to cut them out myself. And that was honestly the most time-consuming part of this setup, was just cutting out the little florals. So I've cut most of the cutting out of the video so that you don't go crazy watching me fussy cut around these flowers. Some of the designs are bigger than others, so obviously they will cover more of the page more quickly, but you can also just lay this down as a solid strip of tape, and I think it would still look quite lovely. I'm just really particular about where I want things to go, and I wanted to make sure that while I wanted some of the flowers to stick over the edge of the gold paper, I didn't want them to interfere with where my heading was going to go or with my quote. So I did it the hard way. Time to get my September header onto the page, and if you've ever used a Cricut, you'll know how this works. You place the transfer tape onto the design. I'm putting this onto paper, and I didn't want it to rip up the paper as I peel off the transfer tape, so I stuck it to the front of my journal a couple of times just to take down the stickiness of the transfer tape, and then I'm burnishing both sides of the September header to try and get it to really transfer to the transfer tape to make my life a little bit easier. But the drop capital here that I've used, it's from a font called Morris, and it is quite finicky, so it was a little bit tricky across all of the headers to get that one to transfer over, but I did it in the end. It's totally okay. I actually used 2 free fonts to put together these headers. As I mentioned, the drop capital at the beginning of each of the words is from a font called Morris, I assume inspired by William Morris, or maybe potentially taken directly from his designs. And the font I used for the rest of the word is called Gaudi Medieval Alternate. I must admit, I've gone a little more maximal on the blue florals than I envisioned in my head when I pictured this theme, but I like it, so it's okay. We're moving on to the calendar spread now. This layout is not going to look like a typical gridded calendar at the end when it's all done, but it actually follows the exact same concept, but I'm just going to include a gold strip along the top of the space where I'll write whatever it is that I need to write for each of the calendar days. I'm just going to have those kind of float and not connect them with vertical lines. And because I want a really sharp, crispy line, I'm starting out by masking off the areas where I don't want my gold paint marker to go with some washi tape, and then I'm going to get a really nice crispy line when I paint with the brush end of those markers through the space that's left over. When you do this, you want to use a washi tape that's not super sticky so that when you peel it up, it's not going to rip the page. There's also kind of a technique to peeling it up that will help you to make sure it doesn't tear anything as it lifts. I mentioned this in my September mystery journal setup as well, but September's a really awkward shape this year. The first falls on a Sunday, and the last day of September actually falls on a Monday, which means you have these 2, if you wanted to have each week have its own row, you'd have 6 rows for the month of September. So I've decided to just wrap the 30th around to the top and put it in the same line as the first in order to save some page space. Also, this gold paint marker is from ArtX, and is it not just the most wonderful color match to my gold paper? I just think it's perfect. So these thick gold bars are going to mark the top of my calendar spaces, but I'm also using the bullet end of the marker to mark the bottom of the calendar, just so it's clear to myself later where my actual planning should go. And now we peel, and I have worked out through trial and error and old nail art advice and painting on walls advice that you should try to peel back the washi tape as close to itself as you can, like peeling it in the opposite direction so it kind of folds back over itself, and that seems to make it release without tearing the paper. I have used this exact calendar setup before in my April 2023 setup, and I actually found it was a little bit difficult not having anything denote the edge of each of the calendar boxes, so I'm using my Sakura Pigma Micron in the 01, which is a very nice kind of fine tip, to just add a little line onto each of the calendar spaces so that I know where they should go, and then I'm going to jump in and add numbers as well. Each of the gold bars here is just 1 dot grid space tall, and I've made the space for each calendar box 4 spaces wide by 4 spaces tall. Here's my dot grid spacing guide for that in case you want to try it yourself. Now that the functional parts of the calendar are all down on the page, we can decorate, and I'm pretty much using the same formula I used for the previous spread for the cover page, except this time instead of decorating the top and bottom edges, I'm going to decorate the left and right outside edges of the spread instead. Also, I haven't given any kind of indication on this page as to which calendar column corresponds to which day of the week, but I always like my weeks to start on a Monday, and I've been bullet journaling for about 7 years at this point, so I kind of know where those are supposed to go. I don't feel like I need necessarily an M for Monday, T for Tuesday, but just know that first column is Monday, and the last column is Sunday. Also, there's always going to be a little bit more space on one side of the calendar than the other just because there are 7 days in a week, unless you set up your calendar so that it crosses the binding across the middle of the spread. I don't really like doing that, so I'm happy to have things a little off balance. This time I've chosen to have 4 days of the week on the right side, so that'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and only 3 days on the left side. That means there's actually a bit more space for gold paper and flowers on the left side than the right, but just by having the same kind of thing, it gives it a symmetry. Even though I will technically have less decoration on the right side, it won't feel like that once it's all finished. I'm also going to deliberately counteract it by placing my second September header on the right page, you'll see, but that's going to help to bring that extra visual weight as well. Alright, let's get this vinyl September header down. I don't always like to have September or, the name of the month twice on the same layout, but for this time, I thought it would be fun just because I really liked using this vinyl header system, and I really liked how it looked. I thought about having the September header sit kind of in the little cradle created between that 30th on the Monday and the 1st on the Sunday, but I decided instead, because of that whole visual weight thing, having more decoration, just a little bit more on the left side, that adding my September header at the top on the right here would really help to balance that out. I thought about leaving it here, but a new challenger appeared. I got these 2 PET tapes with gold gilding recently, and the gold is just such a good match for this theme, I had to try it out. But at their full width, they were definitely too big. They would kind of overwhelm the design. It was getting to be a bit too much, so I used my straight edge cutting thingy to chop it down a little bit and make it work a bit better for this spread. Even just chopping it in half, it was still too big for the top section here, and I was struggling. I really wanted a nice straight edge, obviously, but how was I going to make this work with the straight edge cutting tool thingy? Well, you can add a little bit of tape and then just cut over. That worked so well. I'm so glad I worked out this little hack. If I'm being totally honest with you, I actually sort of wish I hadn't added those little leafies, but it's okay, it's on the page now. It doesn't look bad, it's just a little bit more than I wanted. So we're going to turn the page and move on to my goals and reflections page now. I'm using the Tombow 491, which is this very pale blue. You can only just see it on camera, to line every second space on these boxes. So the top section is going to be where my goals go for the month, and the lower section is for my end of month reflection. I'm really just not vibing drawing boxes around things right now. It's my usual MO, but for some reason lately I would prefer to just leave things nice and open and let them breathe. For this one, I wanted to make sure I had plenty of space to write in those sections, so rather than doing a really solid block of decoration, I'm just adding some little corner pieces with my gold paper instead, and adding some blue florals over the top of those still, of course. I really enjoy layering, but on this page I wanted to pare things back a little bit. In order to really link the decoration from the left to the right side of the page, I thought this time it would be fun to layer my heading a little bit over the top of the florals, and I can get away with that because it is this lovely opaque vinyl, but that would be a little bit trickier if you were trying to do it with a marker directly onto the page. I won't show you a grid spacing guide for this one because I really just have split the page in half. So there's a top section and a bottom section. You can work out where the middle of the page is. I believe in you. But it is done, and we're going to move on to the right side now, which is for my habit tracker. I'm going to start by drawing out 6 tiny calendars for the month of September. These are going to be where I colour in or circle for each day when I complete the habit. I only had 3 last month, and that wasn't enough, so I'm giving myself lots of space here. I am predetermining what the habits will be as well, but I'm going to leave the last one open so that if I decide to add one later, I have that flexibility built in. If you don't have a kneadable eraser in your life, you really need to get one. They are so good. No eraser crumbs, and you can change the shape of them so you can get into tight spaces and not erase over the top of wet ink, but still erase really close to it if you want to. I added a gold bar at the top of each row here for me to place my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No washi tape masking this time, just freehanding it. And here's the grid spacing guide for the habit tracker before I put all the decoration down. Part of what makes a theme feel like a theme, besides things like color scheme, is using the same elements over again, so I wanted to jump back in with this same Fude Makase and add some hand lettering so that that element is not only represented on the quote page back at the cover spread. I am definitely not trying as hard here though to get the copper plate thing really happening. I'm just using my usual kind of hand lettering style instead, which is similar but not the same. Another great thing about this pen is that it brings some contrast to the page, which means it ties in really well with the darker flowers, which there aren't very many of on the opposite side. Gives us some nice contrast to the page because a lot of this stuff is very light. And I'm leaving this last habit tracker box without a title because I don't know if I'm going to use that one yet, or if I do, what it will be for. I deliberately left the right side of my goals page empty so that I could fill that one up with some decoration, and I thought it would be fun to try layering that same leafy washi, well, PET tape in again, but putting it underneath the gold this time so it sort of feels like it's growing out of the wall, if that makes sense. Something I really like to do when I have 2 pages with different purposes next to each other like this is attempt to unify them just by having something cross the middle of the spread. And these little flowers are doing that for me this time. I also have a little bit of space left at the very bottom of this spread too, so I'm going to add some tape down there as well. This time I'm going to use the PET tape with the stars and moons because it has not very much going on it honestly, so it doesn't use very much visual weight, but in the section over here where it would cover the reflection part of the page, I'm going to cut off the top section so that it doesn't interfere with my writing space too much. I added one more little detail at the top and then this spread is done and we will turn the page and move on to the content planner. This is where I plan out what my videos will be each week and which dates specifically which videos should fall on. I'm using the same layout I used last month because I feel like it had the potential to work really well. I didn't use it as much as I would have liked, but I was kind of away at the beginning of August, so there's still time, you know, at the time I'm posting this, we still have half of the month left, but I'd like to give it a really good shot for September, so we're going to do it again. Also, September has 30 days, which means it's going to be nice and symmetrical this time, which always makes me happy. The months with 31 days, you have to offset the right page a little bit, and it's just not as clean. It's still fine, but it's not as clean. I decided I wanted to bring back my gold paint marker for the section where I'll write the initial and the number for each day of the month, so I'm masking off my areas again, just like I did on the calendar spread earlier. It's just going to be this left box, which is 2 spaces wide by 2 spaces tall, and that is going to be solid gold. Here's my grid spacing guide for this one, and it really doesn't have to be a content planner. You could use this to plan meals, you could use this to plan anything that needs to be planned against a calendar. I'm adding some more blue to the top row here. I had to put 3 layers on to make it as saturated as I wanted. That's where I'm going to write what social media platform each of those are going to be for. It's actually just going to be YouTube, Instagram, and a separate column for my channel membership program so I can make sure I'm scheduling live streams and staying up to date with all the stuff I need to do there. Now that my gold paint marker has had a really good chance to dry down, I'm going to jump in with my Sakura Pigma Micron and add the numbers and the initials for each day of the week right over the top of that gold. I always like to do the numbers on the right side and then just add the initial for each day of the week next to it, because I feel like that initial is more important for me even than the number for the date. I post my videos on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning my time, and also Friday evenings, so Tuesdays and Fridays on this calendar are probably the most important days. And on that as well, once I've got my titles across the top here for YouTube, membership, and Instagram, I'm also going to jump back in with my 491 Tombow and highlight those Tuesdays and Fridays on the calendar here. Technically the Tuesday video goes up on Wednesday my time, but it's like 2 a.m. So ideally I want to be in bed and asleep when that happens. So having it organized by the Tuesday makes the most sense to me. So that's what I'll highlight on my calendar. I decided I wanted my heading to go smack in the middle this time because it is such a symmetrical layout. So I've cut it down the middle. I've got CON on the left page, TENT on the right page, because the C is obviously quite a bit bigger than the rest of the lettering. So that seems like the best way to balance this one out. Content Planner is done now, and I love the way this one came together. We're going to turn the page and work on our very last spread for this setup, which is my first weekly for September. This one's a really cute weekly setup. I've been enjoying this one quite a bit lately. The way this one works is you leave a bit of a gap on the left and right sides of the page for some decoration or just some space if you like a lot of negative space on your page. You split the remaining space into 2 columns and 3 rows, so you end up with kind of 6 boxes on each page, very similar to the Ruthie Journals layout that I always steal, except there's a little bit more space around it. And then you can alternate which of those boxes is for planning and which of those boxes is for decoration. This was one of the spreads I did in my live stream recently for my August pages, and I love the way that one looked, so I thought it's the perfect opportunity to bring it back. I'm also starting this weekly from the 2nd of September because the first, more of that week fell into August, so I've included the first in a weekly spread from August, and we're starting the September weeklies from the 2nd and going on from there. The same thing will happen next month, so because the 30th falls in its own week, kind of outside of the rest of the September dates, I'll wrap that one around into my October weeklies instead, so they'll actually start from the 30th of September. I've done lots of page edges, wall decoration situations in this setup, so I wanted to steer clear of that this time and instead add just little torn paper elements in the empty boxes and layer my flowers over the top there. So the theme is still theming, but I'm not doing the same thing that I've done on every other page so far. I mentioned repetition earlier and how that helps to really bring a theme together. I'd only used this Starry Moony PET tape on one other page in the setup, so I thought it would be a good idea to bring it back here and make sure that it feels included and is showing up in more than one spot. Here's our grid spacing guide if you'd like to screenshot for your future reference. And with that, I am all set up for September 2024 in my bullet journal. Let's have a little flip through and see how it all works together. I can't wait to spend September in this theme. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, don't forget to hit subscribe. I make one of these for my own journal every month, as well as one for a mystery journal that I set up for somebody who isn't me and then give away. I also have several previous year's September videos in case you'd like some different inspiration in case this one's not quite your style. On the screen right now I have a link to September in the mystery journal, which is this cute ocean theme, as well as September in my journal last year, which was this still floral but more of a picnic vibe. Can't wait to keep planning with you.